You're there to sell, but you're also there to listen.
Is that the only alternative?
Sure, everything's perfect.
In New York, right, where everything's better.
I can't believe you. All you do is complain about that place and those people.
You can't take a donation back.
Knows what he does, why he does it. No more about the kid who fixes my damn car.
Tone of your voice, I don't like it.
Come on, you must have an opinion.
I'm going to stand there arm in arm with you and make a stand.
I hate you. I know.
Welcome to Mad Men, the weekly show where we discuss a show that used to come out weekly. Each week, we take a close look at an episode of the AMC series Mad Men, which ran from 2007 to 2015. We gear our conversation around the conversation the show is having about gender, the patriarchy, and trying to do these puzzles. They're so difficult. You start with the corners, and next thing you know, everyone's questioning your identity. I'm John Negroni, and Will Ashton, stop counting other people's podcasts.
What up?
And of course, we have Mike Overhulse. And Mike, I have something to say to you.
What up?
Nobody has what you have.
Damn.
You act like it's nothing. My daughter's a podcast. Do you know that? You see this guy, Will? He has no podcasts. You can't trust a person like that.
Wait,
I see you. Yeah. Go ahead, Mike.
What's the podcast totals now? Because this is technically the third I've been on. Will's podcast is ending, and John has like 17.
Oh. And counting. It's like I'm like the Duggars with podcasts.
What has he got? Is there another one besides there? Obviously, Cinemaholics. Listen,
Cinemaholics, starring
wherever you
John
find
and
podcasts.
So yes, here no, you're. Let's ask John. Let's see if how big that brain is. John, this is the third podcast of yours I've been on. What's the other one?
Well, there's Now Conspiring, obviously. That was the first one.
Well, okay, Cinemaholics, Now Conspiring, rebrand, but what's the other one? There's a different one.
Well, we never published it, but we did a pilot for a podcast that never went out.
Oh yeah,
called,
that's right.
The Last Blockbusters.
Okay, I didn't even think about that one.
Is that not what you're getting at? Like,
no, John. It was literally the first podcast I did with you, and it is published. And it's similar to this one. It's about one show specifically. What's the first one I was on?
Well, you were on the Game of Thrones thing, but that was part of Now Conspiring.
The Game of that's what I'm getting at. It was Game of Thrones.
It was on the Now Conspiring feed, Mike.
But sure, and this one's on the in between drafts, but it's a different show.
No, so Mad Men is it's on its own feed. The Game of Thrones thing was like a bonus episode of Now Conspiring. Mike, you forgot. You don't remember our memories. You're forgetting things, and you're feeling me up. I'm not Hannah, Mike. I'm your son.
What? I don't think of you at all.
I haven't gotten to that episode yet, but I've seen that reference before.
So this week on Mad Men,
I was gonna say. We should mention that Mike's pretty drunk.
Yeah. Well, do we have to mention it, Will?
Yeah.
Well, so Mike was he was at an office baby shower for one of the employees there. Not Mike. Mike's not pregnant. But I was going to ask you guys this because we're going to talk about the inheritance, which is all about kids and children becoming parents and all that. But if you were having a baby shower and your coworkers raided the storeroom, what gifts and stuff would they get for you?
Wow. So if the question is specifically about coworkers,
it's got to be your workplace.
I think if I was going to be honest about this, I think coworkers specifically would give me diapers, right? Everybody gets diapers. That's the thing. Babies poop, babies pee, they need diapers.
But it's got to be in the store. No, the point is it has to be in the closet of your workplace. You're not going to find diapers there, are you?
Oh, that's so right. In the closet, it's going to be so much alcohol. We have I work in sales at a tech company. It's going to be bottles on bottles, and we do.
So you're in a Mad Men office.
Yeah, and it's so many snacks, all from Costco. It's if I have to source it from work, it's just booze and Costco snacks.
That's all you would really want, right?
Yeah, I mean it's all I need. You know how many mornings at work I eat Costco egg bites? You have no idea.
I do too. I eat egg bites for breakfast. I go back and forth between the regular kind and the spinach bell pepper.
Ooh, I mean, yeah. By regular kind, do you mean the bacon Gruyere?
Yeah. And you know what I like to do with those? I like to add a little bit of Roberto's salsa to it.
Oh my God, John, we live the same life. Will, you cannot live up.
Will doesn't understand. Will doesn't even like ice cream. You can't trust a person like that.
Yeah, you can't. There you go. That's a good pull. Anyway.
He has no egg bites. So I have a few other ways I was going to open the show. Sure. I was going to say, all right, Will Ashton, now that you've podcasted with me, let's go upstairs. And at one point, I was going to say something along the lines of like, Michael Overhulse, you want to give me your temper? And this is a good one, Will. I came to rescue you, Will. I'm not joking. We can go anywhere. I have a podcast.
That would have been a good one. That would have been my pick, I think.
That's a good one.
Yeah,
that's a good one.
You fucked up.
Or I would say, sometimes, Will, I feel like I'll float away if a podcast isn't holding me down.
There, that's all right. I still think though the best one was the one you said before.
The Inheritance. This is season 2, episode 10. We are just a few episodes away from finishing up season 2. Who'd have thought? And this latest episode is directed by Andrew Bernstein. He did The Gold Violin earlier this season, as well as Flight 1. I think 2 episodes that, Will, you were pretty fond of. He also did Babylon last season. So this is his 4th episode. And the episode itself is written by Lisa Albert and Marty Noxon and Matthew Weiner. So this aired October 5th, 2008. We're going to do our normal thing, talk about the episode, and I have some fun little trivia toward the end. But I was also going to mention that the ratings are pretty good for this one. 1.3 million people watched it when it first aired. And did I have anything else? I think that's it. I
do.
Oh, no, please.
You're missing trivia if we're going to jump into right now. Are you ready?
No, I wasn't going to go into trivia, yeah.
Well, this is going to blow your mind. If you're going to talk about dates and directors and who's involved. Yeah, there we go. 4 days before my birthday.
October? Like that date?
October 9th,
do we share
baby.
Because I'm October 5th? Oh, yeah.
Birthday,
I'm just a couple days after you.
Happy birthday, John.
Wait, a couple days after? You mean before? If you're October 5th?
I'm October 13th.
Are you?
But,
that's right. Yeah, that's right. You just said October 5th.
But, you know, I gotta say, Mike, I feel like we never really celebrated our birthdays, together. I celebrate with like Brian Coleman all the time. Brian Coleman, not a friend of the show. He's never been on, but a mutual friend between the three of us. But I don't know what's going on, Mike.
Yeah, well, speaking of podcast, he has his own, friendship podcast, and so I think that's why
he literally has a friendship podcast. And neither of us have been on it.
Kind of weird. Even though we were both at your wedding. Yeah, whatever.
He was my groomsman, one of them. But okay, I was going to mention that. You were. We talked literally right before we aired that you sat with my mom. And you told her that you could rescue her, and you gave her these comics. It was kind of weird, actually. But anyway, I was going to mention that this episode ends with, and I'm going right to the end, Don Draper as a Venture song comes on, and he's looking out, and he's about to land in LA. And I'm literally going to LA tomorrow as we record this. Yeah. So I'm going to be playing that song probably when I'm in the plane. The sun's coming out.
I can easily imagine you. The sun cresting on your face, a look of jaded. It's not really optimism, I guess. It's on his face. He seems more like scornful, I guess, in that moment. It's. I
think that's his version of looking excited. But also, Pete Campbell won't be sitting next to me, but my wife will be. That said, I'm always on the aisle seat or the middle. She likes the window.
Oh, that's a good thing to bring up, where we sit. I am also a middle guy so that my fiance Hannah can get window or aisle. And John, I mean, you've seen this show before, and, I'm assuming Will's seen the finale here in the background of a bar mitzvah somewhere. Do you think you're going to have a similar time in California as Don?
I think so, Mike. And we should mention, of course, Will doesn't know what's in store, but I have mentioned, I think before on here, that I really like the next couple episodes. And I'm gonna say this right now. I like this episode, the Inheritance, a lot more than I used to, because I definitely picked up on some things that I didn't pick up on previous watches. And I'm curious if either of you are gonna pick up on them yourselves. So I'm going to start with that because the basic setup of the episode is that, Don and Betty, the main thing is that Don and Betty go over to Gene and Gloria's, Gene being Betty's father, after they find out that he had a stroke a few days ago and they weren't aware of. And they just basically go to make sure he's okay. Meanwhile, Pete is still kind of dealing with the fallout of his father's death. He's about to ship out to LA with Paul. His wife, Trudy, of course, the wonderful Allison Brie, wants him to consider adoption. And then our other plot is, of course, we have Paul. Paul and his girlfriend, and they're at odds because he's going to California for this business convention for Sterling Cooper. Instead of going with her for a voter registration effort, his girlfriend, Sheila, of course, being a Black woman, and that being quite a scandal in the 1960s. So that's the inheritance. I was going to ask you guys, what do you think ultimately this episode is about? We'll start with you, because you look raring to go.
I feel like I'm kind of becoming a broken record in season 2 in our coverage, but I feel it was a classic example of an episode that I liked fine while I was watching it. I thought it was solid, if a little disjointed. But upon, thinking back on it and reading a little bit about it from the Mad Men carousel, I definitely think I appreciate it upon reflection, maybe more so than even watching it. But it's not a bad episode. Maybe among the weaker ones for me of the season so far, but it's solid. I enjoyed it. I kind of get the sense, and I'm curious if you'll agree or disagree. It felt like it would have made more sense if it was focused less on Paul and more on Harry. They kind of talk more about you have, these 3 different men in the office at a different point in their family lives. Like obviously Don's pretty broken. He's in a marriage that's crumbling, potentially going to fall apart for good. Kind of caught odds with Betty at this point, and she's obviously in a very fragile state, especially with her father. And then you have Pete, who's coming in with this kind of difficult relationship with his family. And then it would have been interesting to have Harry, who's, just about to start his own family, and, coming into fatherhood. And obviously he has sort of a complicated relationship with the office. And I don't know, it just seemed like maybe a missed opportunity, but you think it would have been better or worse if it focused on him over Paul?
Well, I think they both get kind of similar screen time if you really look at it. In fact, that's kind of why I hesitated a little bit on is Paul really one of the B plots or C plots here? Because we get a lot with Harry in a short amount of time. I'll call back to last season with the Hildy thing. And I do think that their stories connect. That's the thing. I would totally have agreed with you, Will, before I rewatched this episode, because that's how I always felt about this one. I always felt like just watching it, it just wasn't my favorite. It reminds me a little bit of Long Weekend, where it feels like more of a slog to get through than other episodes do. There's something about the way the episode moves that it just doesn't seem to have that kind of spark to it. That's everything's just clicking and going and going. Everything's connecting thematically for sure. And you can clearly see a through line between what each character is going through. I think though, I like this episode a little bit more than I used to, because there's just something about it where I am finding a lot of that thematic energy is a lot stronger than I usually give it credit for, on just a lot of that subtext, a lot of that one of the things that really revealed itself for me that I did notice before in this is when Betty is talking about her dad in this episode, I really get the sense that she's really talking about Don. And when I started watching the episode through that lens, it was really starting to come together better for me. And that could be a weakness into the episode itself, because it's not the clearest thing, but it's definitely something that I think adds weight to what you're watching. But what about you, Mike? Do you like this episode more than me? Where were you at?
I think I find myself as a mid ground between you and Will, where I definitely agree, John. As a rewatch, I totally hear you where you find those thematic through lines, but I don't agree that it's not a weakness of the episode, right? Because this show isn't written. Although while it's easier to watch as a rewatch, it's not written to watch as a rewatch, right? This was written as a weekly show to watch, by through. So I do agree with Will here, where it's kind of confusing with the through lines of each of the characters, and it is enhanced as you rewatch it and understand, specifically on the arc, I would say, of these last episodes of the end of season 2, where you get Betty and you get Dawn, and you know what Dawn's about to do in the next couple of episodes, and I'll titillate that for our audience. But I did enjoy this episode. I see where you're getting at, John, but I definitely think it has merit as its own episode as being a little confusing. But I think it's confusing. Well, maybe not confusing, but it is a big setup for what we get here at the end of the season, which I think is definitely the high point and the best part here of season 2, which has been a little rough.
Let's get into more detail. And I definitely want to talk about one specific thing. Matthew Weiner has said that he believes the episode is about the process of going from being a child to being a parent. So, for example, we see in 2 specific scenes, there's a scene where Betty is talking with her brother William about their father. And, you see like children talking about their parents and them being parents themselves. And that mirrors a different scene where we see Pete and Bud, brothers, talking about their mother. And I think what Weiner's sort of getting at there is he thinks that this episode is about that process of like when you're a child and you realize that, your parent is like no longer in that role anymore. There's a lot of confusion of like, who is the parent, who is the child in this episode. And you see a lot of it with Glenn. You see a lot of it with how Betty interacts with Sally toward the end of the episode. Betty's conflict throughout. You see it in the way that Don in particular seems to really feel like lost because he doesn't have his kids. He doesn't have he can't even see them or have a real life with them. And his motivations there are a little interesting. Personally, I think there's something else here that Weiner probably put in there too, along with Lisa Albert. But I think there's something else in this episode about people, about found family, people who are unrelated by blood, finding connection and purpose. For Don, that's everything because he doesn't have blood. His brother is gone. He has no people, right? Pete is weighing that with should he adopt? I think even with the stuff with Paul, connecting with, a community of people, and obviously very in a cringeworthy way, but connecting with people that not only are not related by blood, but are racially, segregated from him. And that's kind of what I mean. It's once I started doing the episode through that lens, a lot of things kind of came alive for me that felt a little bit murkier before. Do you think I'm ridiculous, Will?
No, I think that's all valid. I mean, I definitely feel like the big thing for this season for me has just been the extended focus on Betty and kind of making her sort of the emotional center of these back half of the episodes. I think not only do I think her character is so fascinating and intricate in the way she's laid out and developed throughout these episodes, but also I just think January Jones' performance really gets a shine a lot in these episodes in particular. But yeah, I mean, I think there's a lot of interesting stuff as far as, like you said, with Betty is kind of at this point now where she's been without a mother for, I think, 2 years, I believe.
Her mother passes away, I think, early 1960, late 1959, something like that. And we are in late summer 1962. So it's 2 years and then maybe a couple months.
Yeah. And then obviously she has sort of complicated relationship with her. But I mean, there was a sense of stability with both her and her father around. And now that she considers herself sort of orphanized by, not only her mother having passed a few years ago, but her dad in a very serious mental decline. She's also kind of weighing that with the sense that she might be sort of orphaning her kids and kind of keeping their father away from them. But obviously she's at this point where she doesn't really want to let Dawn kind of welcome back into him. But there is that moment where they have that sort of intimate moment of very missionary sex in the child's bathroom or the child's bedroom, or is it? I think it's her
she's
child
on top, so
right.
It's a little bit.
Well, she has
a little bit more
in
evangelical
the dynamic.
Than that.
Yeah, sure. But yeah, no, it's interesting stuff there. And then obviously Pete doesn't have his own father, and he has sort of his conflicted relationship with his very abrasive mother, and he's kind of at a point where he wants to get into fatherhood, but the definition of who is deemed a father is through the outdated viewpoint of adoption from his mother and his family is definitely it's very interesting stuff. And I agree with Mike as far as just mulling about it and just really kind of thinking about the ideas at play here, I think are maybe a little bit more rewarding than like watching them play out in this episode, at least for the first time. But they're all very intricate and stimulating stuff.
No, go ahead, Mike.
Yeah, I just love to just jump on that. I also think this episode is also, as much as about familial connection, I think it's also about class connection as well. You get that in each of the storylines. First with Don, right? Because he's definitely not accepted, right, into Betty's family, even though he views himself as someone who has, built himself up by the bootstraps, is a partner at his company, is part of country club, should be considered as high class. He's not. He's
resented for it.
He's resented for it.
That's the thing. He's resented because he made that stuff on his own. And I think Gene in particular, and also William, you can see it too, they're insecure about themselves coming from money. And they see a guy like Don, and that's the main reason why they don't accept him. Because it's like a sick kind of like jealousy, but it's not even, jealousy is too simple of it. It's more sort of like feeling insecure and like, I couldn't have done that myself, and like Don was able to.
But then there's a mirror of it, right? With Paul, who then goes to these, who goes with his interracial relationship into her home state to protest, quote unquote, but it's only because he didn't get to go to California, right? And so he's also not accepted. And he's, it's also because on his side, it's his insecurity of looking like the progressive guy in the relationship. I'm going to go fight this. He didn't want to. He didn't care about it, but he did it because he was available. And then I think you also have the middle ground of Pete, right? Who is now rejecting his own family, his own mother, right? Who's judging her for, not seeing how involved his father was with what you have to assume with is a lower class, right? These women he was spending his money on, wasting his family wealth, right? Essentially. So you just like Weiner does often.
With strangers, he says.
Exactly. And I think that's what's so good. There's so, if you tune into it, it's not just one through line, but he gives you kind of every perspective of the option in these episodes. And I think it's what he did here with the class connections.
That's actually related real quick to what I was going to say about Pete before, which is that there's something really interesting about how at the beginning of the series, Pete says he wants to be like Don, right? And he kind of in a cosmic way gets his wish because he goes from riches to rags. And now he's sort of like transitioning into being that same self-made man as Don, because he effectively is having to start from scratch. Now, at that sense, he still has all the privilege in the world. He still has like a lot of like opportunities that have been like thrust upon him that he wouldn't have gotten. It's very different from Don, but it is closer in approximation to Don than it would have otherwise have been. He's no longer just like the Dykeman, legacy is what's giving him his job. He actually does have like talent that's showing in his work.
But I also wanted to tie into that as far as like you were talking about Don being considered sort of the pariah or the outsider of the family. But I also find it really fascinating that there's also Gloria, who is like the second wife or the soon to be wife, I believe, to Eugene. And like she's obviously only been in the picture for maybe a year or so, if that. And I think Betty even calls her like a vulture at one point. Like she sees her as this sort of, leech on the family, but everyone else sort of accepts her because she's been there and is supporting Gene through this whole process.
Well, out of convenience, right?
Sure.
Like they just like that she's looking after him so they don't have to.
Right.
Specifically
well, that's what I mean.
William.
Yeah. And then likewise, Betty is also kind of seen as an outsider as well because she, lives in hoity-toity New York, as far as they see it. And it's like, yeah, like she's obviously way more caring about Gene than maybe her brother in some respects, her new mother. But yeah, it's just seen as, her kind of just trying to save face or just kind of like they don't even include her in the conversations when he's had all these strokes. And it's only really because,
But it's not just that; it's the heirloom too, which shows just such a good point that the new mom and the brother's wife also are so out of it that they don't even know that this precious family heirloom is so clear to Betty that it should be hers, and no one even knows. no one even gives it a second thought. It's been with the wife for so long. Like, it's so disconnected.
And that messes with Betty's head because she was raised to be a replica of her mother. Like, there is a reason why her father, like, confuses her for Ruthie, his wife, his late wife, because Betty, as we like learned throughout the first season especially, was modeled to be like her mom in every respect, and that speaks a lot to like her baggage and all that. I was going to mention too, because it was kind of touched upon before. I think you mentioned it, Will, how she is kind of, you know, by the end of this episode, you can see that she is so paranoid now about her children going through what Glen has gone through, and seeing herself in Helen Bishop in a way, and like starting to see like, if I go through with this and I have a divorce, what's going to happen to my kids? And so you're starting to see like the gears turn there, where she kind of like, it's almost like she grows up a little bit in this episode, or kind of like transitions out of that sort of like Glen baggage. And Glen is back. We haven't mentioned that. Glen Bishop is here. He is weirder than ever, and I believe he is Will Ashton's favorite character.
I do find Glen to be kind of a fascinating little weirdo of a guy. I was thinking about this. I don't know if you guys have seen any of the marketing for Beau is Afraid, the new Ari Aster film.
No.
How about you, Mike?
I have not seen it.
Okay. Anyway, like the first poster for the film is like, it appears to be like a CGI'd version of Joaquin Phoenix as like a child, and he looks exactly like Glen.
Like
in
the
this
glass
episode.
eyes,
yeah,
the sort of like Mona Lisa, like I can't like escape the gaze. Yeah,
right.
Wait, are you telling me it looks like River Phoenix?
Wow, that's messed up, Mike. You should apologize.
That's not messed up.
Are you talking about his new
Betty's
son,
dad
River Phoenix?
Feels her up, and you're telling me Betty's dad feels her up, and then she goes and fucks Glen? Are you kidding me? This is messed up.
I mean, I don't know what episode of the Mad Men you saw, Mike, but I think you got a bootleg or something like that.
Oof. Well, in any case, I was going to point out something I found.
He's like really off balance.
Something I found really interesting.
Just like Glen after Betty fucked him.
Shit. Any case, I was going to say that I thought it was interesting that William is the name of Betty's brother, right?
Yes.
So,
are you going to mention that the wife's names are Judy, both of them?
No, I was going to mention that when Betty and William kind of have a heart-to-heart a little bit, such as they can, William comes in through the window, and he said he was playing in the old playhouse. So it's like them kind of playing playhouse for themselves, like in that little moment. And then later we see with Glen, she's on the outside looking in to Glen, who is, a literal child, and she's like this, grown adult, almost like a giant peering into. And I don't know, I just thought that was a really interesting little detail.
Yeah, there are a lot of characters in this episode playing house, and it's a nice connection. Yeah. And but I was going to say there is a fun little thing where William's wife's name is Judy, and Pete's brother Bud, his wife's name is also Judy, and Pete's wife is Trudy. And I just think that that's very fun. I think that's just the writers having a good time and cracking laughs in the writers' room. Speaking of, I really like in the beginning of the episode when Pete says that like people in Pasadena all have TB. I think that's a funny little like reference, the fact that they shoot the show in Pasadena, and so like they're all like kind of in that area, and that's fun.
Everybody loves Judy. Pete loves Trudy, and Betty's dad for sure fucking loves her booty.
All right.
That's a joke based on the fact that I don't know if you saw the episode, John, but Betty's dad feels her up. Let's be very specific about that.
Yeah,
it's very awkward.
Pretty traumatizing. We get to see Aloma Wright in this episode, and I sometimes forget. Like when I see her, I'm just like Laverne. Of course, Aloma Wright is in Scrubs. But we find out is kind of like there's this interesting thing where you kind of see that she was Betty's nanny growing up in a similar way that Carla is to Sally. And it kind of makes you wonder, right? Like, I wonder what Betty's mother, Ruthie, like what her relationship must have been like with Viola. But Betty and Viola have a really interesting scene here that I've always been kind of curious about. And I was kind of alluding to this before, But I really just get the sense that when she's talking about like, he doesn't know who I am, it's like, yes, on the surface, she's talking about her father, confusing her for her mother and how awful that was for her. But I think she's also talking about Dawn here. And we're just seeing that sort of classic Mad Men writing where like characters are talking about something and they really are talking about someone or something else. And in this case, like it's that on steroids, because we also have the thing with Glenn, which is such a clear, you know, she's like she's dressing him like Dawn, giving him that like little haircut. And I think I'm going to tie this all together. I think that has everything to do with why she ultimately sleeps with Dawn. But I want to ask you guys first. I have my own little theory for this. But yeah, Will, why do you think Betty decides that she wants to get it on in her father's house, in his household, under his roof, with Dawn, who she hates?
I think it's a momentary source of comfort at a time when she's feeling very sort of lost and insecure about the state of things. Like she obviously is struggling with the loss of Dawn and not having him be that source of romantic comfort in her life, such as he was. I mean, he was always sort of distant anyway, but there is that sort of absence. And then now we have, her own father in this sort of confused state with her family, and she feels like she's kind of a stranger looking in, as we said, kind of playing playhouse. And so I feel like there is a sense of like, comfort, but also like intimacy to be found at a time when she hasn't really been able to find a connection with many other people in her life. And yeah, I don't know. I mean, it's not really, I think, driven by romance or even, a sense of like wanting to reconnect with Dawn. I think it's just that like kind of moment where she just feels that she wants some sort of stability at a point when everything's kind of spiraling. But Dawn mistakes it for something a little bit more rekindling, and that doesn't quite pay off.
So I agree with an aspect of that, but I have a different take. But I want to hear Mike. Yeah, what do you think?
Let's put it into the words of John earlier, right? Betty was made to be into an image of her mother. And what that brings is a type of class recognition and also class role. So now let's fast forward to where Betty is at actually in life. Her husband is cheating on her and she doesn't know what's happening. Her biggest judgment in season 1 was a divorced woman, and now she's becoming that. Her family is in shambles. Her mom is dead. Her dad is losing his mind, thinks she is her own mother. She does not like the stepmom. And her brother is playing playhouse with a wife who doesn't even know how their family works, right? And so Betty is looking for really any semblance of control that she can. And I do think it's really important.
Nailed it.
It's important that she's on top, really, right?
Well
she's trying
done.
to control. This is who I am. This is our life. This is how the roles are supposed to be.
Yeah, she wants control. I literally wrote that almost word for word. It's like she wants to feel control over something, and she sees Dawn as an opportunity. I was going to say too, because like also, even on the most literal level, this woman has needs, like she hasn't been able to have sex with anyone for a really long time. I mean, this is the first time she and Dawn have sex, I believe, actually, no, they do have sex like on like 3 Sundays, I think it is, like morning sex or whatever. But they were.
But can't he not get it up?
Well, that stuff was before. Like while he was sleeping with Bobby Barrett, he got his groove back. He distracted this thing. And that said, though, like they've been estranged now for a while, and she has been sort of, here is this opportunity where he's just laying right there. And I think it's a combination of like, I'm going to fuck this guy because like I have power over him, and it's going to feel good, and I want to. For her, it's a completely biological thing. And that I think is punctuated by the fact that Dawn is the one who wakes up alone and realizes he's alone. She's gone. She got what she wanted. She has nothing else she needs from him besides that D. And by D, I do not mean Dawn or Draper. I mean Dick.
But isn't that what John does? Isn't that what John Hamm Dawn does to his women too? Right? He gets what he wants out of them. He gets his professional inspiration. He gets his I feel important. He gets whatever he needs, and it's never from Betty. And finally, Betty gets it from him.
He lost at his own game, and that game is not a puzzle, but it is a puzzle. But it's not.
But he doesn't even know. He doesn't even know he lost. That's how dumb Don is in regards to how this works.
I love that whole sequence. Like, he is so in this episode out of place. He is just in every scene. Like, even when he goes back to the office, he's out of place. He walks in, he calls the receptionist by the wrong name. You know, he's kind of disoriented. The entire time he's with Betty's family, he's uncomfortable. He clearly doesn't want to be doing this. Like, he's there out of obligation. He's doing the right thing by being there for Betty, but he clearly doesn't want to. He clearly doesn't like being around these people. He clearly is uncomfortable with pretending everything's okay. And the one chance he gets when, like, they get to their house, he has to leave immediately. And I think that of course all speaks to why he feels like by the end he's got to get the hell out of there. He's like, I'm going to LA, forget this. He's kind of like me in 2014 when I was like, you know what, I'm moving to California, not LA. But I was like, you know what, I'm done with Virginia, it's over.
I did want to kind of mention that I feel like this episode kind of like dances around sort of like you said, like that dreamlike kind of surrealist quality, not like surreal in the way that like Twin Peaks is surreal, or even that like the later episodes of Sopranos is surreal, but like just that kind of sense of like you don't really know what's real, or like things just seem kind of off or weird. Like,
yeah, all the furniture has been moved a couple of inches, but it's hard to tell.
Yeah, I really love like the scene when he comes into the office and it's like pretty vacated. It just so happened that like the Los Angeles flyer is on his secretary's desk. It's also like not like he's in the usual place, like you mentioned, but then he like goes into like that boardroom and there's just like a huge party, and then Harry's wearing like the baby bib or baby bonnet or whatever, and it's just like all these like kind of weird touches that are like not fully out there, like weird, surreal, but like just like odd enough that you kind of wonder like what's exactly going on. And I love that about the scene with Betty and Glenn too, the scenes with Betty and Glenn as well.
Yeah. Ooh, they're so weird.
With that too, it's so good because he goes back to the office and he feels so out of touch, and he thinks that being in power gives him that connection. But then, it's so good because who comes in and instead of talking about the baby shower says happy birthday, but like the controlling partner of the company, who obviously Don idolizes.
I just wanted to say happy birthday.
Oh, I gotta say.
Wait. It just shows you like so out of touch. Like being empowered does not make you in touch, and it means nothing, right? If this show is about who are you if not at work, and Don's realizing, oh, maybe I don't want this, which just put a pin in it, so sets up the rest of this fucking season. Oh, it's so good. I can't wait to talk about it.
I gotta say with Bert, I just think that he has a soft spot for Harry, as we've seen, and that kind of speaks to like why he's a little bit like, oh, party for Harry, I gotta step in and say something.
Two things. One, you could argue, I guess, that Bert is the father of the company and therefore is out of touch. You know, I don't think that's intentional at all. But the fun idea. I also want to say,
there's also Roger, kind of like his like teenage kids are like super pissed at him for good reason toward the end, right? He's like trying to like make small talk with them, and they're just like, "Get out of here, Dad! You suck."
Yeah, I also like that. There's that moment when we like start the episode, and we see like Dawn and Peggy like right next to each other, almost kind of like father and mother. Kind of like watching over like the kids, and like, you know, like they're kind of, you know, getting ready for their little presentation, stuff like that. And it's like,
I feel so bad for Peggy in this whole episode.
Yeah. Did you like,
she really
did you read the pamphlet?
Short straw.
You know, like it's like,
why didn't I send her to LA? And she's just like, yeah, why don't you?
Right.
You know? And like the whole thing where like she literally gave a baby up to adoption, and like the irony of that, and like Pete and her having that conversation where he clearly is trying to like, you know, once again, like for the third or fourth time this season, tries to like talk to her because he gets something from her he doesn't get from anyone else, or he's trying to get something from her that he's not really getting from her, but he thinks he is. And it's just, I feel so bad for her because she's like trapped by this like dude who's like stuck in her life.
Yeah, pawning off his mommy issues to the mom of his child, not knowingly,
not even knowing.
But I was gonna say, just before we move off from it, that line from Bert is the hardest I laugh in this whole season. That was such a funny line. I was howling. That was such a great line.
It's the delivery from Robert Morris. It's just pitch perfect.
Happy birthday.
I just wanted to say happy birthday.
and no one corrects him. It's so good.
Right, yeah,
it's
they're just like
yep.
I also felt for Joan in this episode. You know, like as soon as Roger and Jane get mentioned, she's just like, brutalized by it. And like, I really like that whole scene where like she and Don are so chilly toward Roger. He knows why, but they obviously are like, they're civil and they're not going to like be dramatic. But like they also, you could just see it on their faces. They're just like, what are you doing? Like, you know that we're mad with you, but like he has this like responsibility. He's like, he is still their boss. He is still in charge and he has to still be like the parent to them. So it's like this, it kind of reminds me of when Duck, had his kids in the office and he's just like talking to them out of obligation and they're like, we don't care. Like that same sort of dynamic. It's like Matthew Weiner in this episode where he puts his own kid, the kid who plays Glenn, in the episode, clearly has some like hangups too about his parents and about his children and how his children must view him and how all of that sort of interplays. And again, I think that's why this episode I think is a little bit better than I've usually given it credit for. Was there anything else that you guys like? There were all kinds of like little things in this. There was something I noticed here that I never noticed before. Allison. We've seen Allison a bunch of times. She works at the front. And last season, we saw her hook up with Ken Cosgrove accounts. And in this episode, we saw her be racist. I'm not, sugarcoating it. Like, literally, like, she walks Sheila over to Paul. And, like, the look on her face when Paul, like, kisses her, she is, like, a total bigot. And I would never realize it before because Allison, throughout the show, it's like a sweetheart, But I was very disappointed in Allison, the fictional Allison.
Well, it's rare that you actually see bigots show the true colors, all the time. It doesn't happen until it's like January 6th and people are storming the Capitol and hear your friends.
To your point, usually it's more subtle. Like usually people are like uncomfortable with that sort of thing in a less like kind of way, like she is. Like it is kind of weird how over the top her reaction is.
Yeah, they usually use like coded language or so in the office they're usually a little bit more discerning, I guess.
Because you see the more subtle racism with Paul. Paul is more subtly racist with like Hollis, call me Paul.
Sure.
Have you met my girlfriend Sheila? Like, okay, dude.
But isn't that progressivism for the time is to be subtly racist? But
it is for this current time.
1962, right? Like Jerry Jones, the owner of the Cowboys, is actively protesting black people going to his school, right? And it's that, unfortunately, also we're in Manhattan, we're in New York, a progressive part of the country. The norm is to be racist. It's not.
I would say New York around this time wasn't progressive. I think it was more like liberal, and it was more sort of like. Go ahead.
I was going to say, I think he's saying that it's more progressive than other states at this time.
In some ways, maybe. I think it, but yes. I think like it's also extremely conservative, like extremely like old money,
Oh, sure, yeah.
But the arts and stuff, sure. Like you do have like the bohemian movement there. You have stuff like that. But I think that is like still on the precipice of taking over culture, and it hasn't quite yet. Like you're just sort of seeing the embers of that.
I mean, Woodstock hasn't even happened yet, has it? Like
we're a while away from like the hippie movement taking over, and I'm sure Will's very curious how and if Mad Men handles hippies. Besides the ones we've already seen, I guess in the first season.
It's exactly the same as the Jesus Revolution coming out the same day as Cocaine Bear, the best juxtaposition of movies in recent history. Which will I choose?
I don't know which to watch.
Is that next weekend?
Cocaine Bear? No, it's the end of the month. February 24th.
No. Is it? I thought it was the 17th.
I don't know about Jesus Revolution, but I think Cocaine Bear is February 24th.
I promise you they're coming out on the same weekend. So if it is the 24th...
Is Cocaine Bear the same weekend as Magic Mike's Last Dance or Ant-Man and the Wasp Quantumania?
They're different. I know specifically that they're different.
Cocaine Bear. Jesus Revolution...
Also 24th, I promise you.
They'll be out at the same time. You will go to a movie. Oh yeah, Jesus Revolution is February 22nd. Earlier that week.
Still
You will go to the movie theater at the end of February, and you will look at the marquee, and you'll have a decision to make. That's it.
I was also just gonna say, I found Paul's scene on the bus to be notably cringy for that reason that we were discussing previously before we got into conversations about Cocaine Bear. And then just like that, he's very much just like, trying to be progressive, but obviously being very clunky and inadvertently kind of racist.
He's being performative.
Right.
Yeah, he's dropping that Marx, with like a really hard X.
Yeah. But then you see, remind me.
What was that?
I'm sorry, I didn't mean to cut onto you, Will. I was making a joke saying, isn't progressivism performatism?
Yeah, you are
not
correct.
In all cases.
In some respects, at least.
Well, that's the thing. It's like everything's performative, but I mean, there's a difference between having a belief or having like a progressive worldview and like, trying to advertise it as part of your identity to make yourself feel better about yourself. That to me is more like you're putting on a performance, and it's a bit of more of pretending. It's not really what who you really are. You're just sort of like taking on a persona. Sure. And people do it with all ideologies. But it just made me think of like, Paul would have voted for Obama twice if he had the chance. It's like, verbiage. Yeah. Whereas like you kind of see just like there are some people who like it doesn't even cross their mind. They just sort of will accept somebody, as they are. And it's not really something that they feel like, insecure about, I guess. But anyway.
In any case, I just wanted to point out that like, you have Paul in this kind of cringy scene on the bus, and I was waiting for Sheila to kind of be a little like annoyed or upset, but she has like this kind of loving look on her face, and it's just like, oh, my boyfriend's being a good progressive boo, like being a good guy.
She's I think she's happy that like she's still under the impression that he dropped the convention to go. I do think it's funny too that he says just like I can't go. It's a convention. I can't tell you about it. And it's like so funny that in the 1960s, like the idea of like a work convention is like this mysterious, really important thing to some people. Obviously, like you couldn't say that in today's day and age of like, yes, well, I understand that it's our child's baptism, but unfortunately, I have to go to this convention. Convention, egad.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. I do find the relationship between Paul and Sheila kind of interesting because he can be like very genuinely loving and sweet in one moment, and then kind of condescending and belittling in another. And I don't know.
Of course, yeah. And I mean, I think Joan had him pegged earlier in the season when she was telling him like, "You are doing this to make yourself look more interesting than you really are." And I think, part of him does care about this person. It is built upon some sort of like real emotion there. But I think unfortunately for him, there's more to it for his interest than there is like for his genuine like feeling and willingness to put Sheila before himself, which clearly isn't the case.
Yeah, it just shows it, right? That although, it's not exactly a specifically exploitative relationship, which obviously like blaxploitation is huge for the era. It's going to become even bigger in the 70s. She is more of a prop to him than a human because he does use it, right? His first priority is to go to this convention. And then that's the thing I was going to bring up about this episode is that Joan takes so much pleasure in telling him that he can't go to LA. And he is so upset about it. He's so upset about it until he, like a white man,
the smile on Joan's face.
He throws a tantrum. Out how he can use it to his advantage, which is in his personal life, right? So again, going back to the show, who are you if you're not? Who are you if you're not who you are at work? It's if I can't use this work situation to my advantage, I'm going to use this personal situation to my advantage, and it's still just people, men specifically, trying to use everything to their advantage and take power in their society.
When it comes to Harry, I mean, we don't get that much with him, but I think what we do get with him is interesting. We get him sort of like settling into the reality that he's about to have a newborn. He's about to have like his life sort of turned upside down in terms of having to have this child, dominate his schedule, dominate, like, he can't just go to LA and meet these executives, show his face, or shave his face. And you see that like discomfort he clearly has about, this responsibility now being there, and how it's not something that you can tell. It's not something that he seems to be against, like the idea of having a kid in the way that it seems like Pete is. But you do still sort of see that it's like this sinking feeling, this like, okay, my life is about to change forever and I don't know if I'm ready. And you know how I said earlier about like characters in Mad Men when they're talking about one thing and they're really talking about someone else? Sometimes they're talking about themselves. Anyway, I'm not talking about me though. I hope you didn't get that out of what I just said, guys. I was talking about Harry, just Harry, just Harry being nervous about having kids.
If we're talking about other people right now without talking about ourselves, wow, yeah, Don is so drunk in this episode. He's just so drunk.
I thought you were going to be like Don. Don has such a big.
Yeah, no, don't. I would not go there. I go the exact opposite. It's like
Don is secure in his masculinity.
Exactly. Don is happy to be friends with John Negroni.
Don is certainly not feeling extremely awkward right now in this entire podcast. Hey, look, it's Helen Bishop. Helen Bishop is back. Will, what do you think? Are you happy to see Helen? You missed her, right?
Is this her first appearance in season 2?
It might be. I don't
Yes.
I don't think we've seen her since the finale when I don't even know if we saw her then either, because like I don't think we saw her when she was in the store while Betty held hands with Glenn in the car.
Right. I was gonna say the last time I think we saw her was when she got slapped in the grocery store.
Yeah, maybe there might have been a time in between, but it was probably extremely small.
Yeah, in any case,
she's been busy still campaigning for Kennedy.
Yes, and doing some unspeakable things to several different boyfriends, and she's having a good ass time. That's for sure.
Yeah, she.
So's Kennedy.
Yeah, maybe that's one of her boyfriends. We don't know.
We don't know. In any case, what was the question about Glen Bishop?
No, just bringing up that Helen is back.
Helen Bishop.
Yes, she. This is unfortunately, I will say, I don't think we're going to see her for a while. I won't say if this is the last time we ever see her. I do know if it is, but I don't want to give it away.
Just when she reconnected with Betty and seemed to forge a...
Well, really just connected with Betty, because I don't think they ever really...
Right.
Well, she just gets a new job with NCIS.
Yeah. Okay, so I just fact checked it, and yes, the last episode she was in was Red in the Face, which that's the episode where she's slapped by Betty. So this is the first time we've seen her since. Interesting.
Who else is red in the face right now?
You, because you were embarrassed.
Nope, Mike, because he's drunk.
Yeah, I was going to say drunk Mike. You nailed it. That's me.
Did you know that Darby Stanchel was in an episode of that 80s show? I didn't.
Oh man, the long forgotten and much derided sequel series to that 70s show before that 90s show.
Yeah. I know, I see here, like her main thing is Scandal, but I don't know what she's up to these days.
I do appreciate that 90s show was like, that 80s show might be a disgrace and awful, but we aren't going to disrespect the canon. So we're going to jump to the 90s in honor of that. Yeah.
The same old thing.
You want some water, Mike?
We did last week.
Okay. Was there anything else that you guys wanted to cover in the episode? I feel like we touched upon everything, but was there anything you felt like we could still kind of cover off in a little bit more detail before we go to trivia?
I just feel like there's not a thing to do but talk to you. But we're
I was going to mention Hildy. I felt for Hildy because like she obviously is very drunk and she's sad because she cared about Harry Crane a lot, and she does that sort of like, I'm so happy for you, like, and I think she is. I think she's kind of gotten over it to the extent that she can in that time. Like, I don't think she's like still pining over Harry, but obviously like she's sad, and I do wonder like what's going through Harry's head in that scene, because it seems like he's just kind of putting her off a little bit there, but what are you gonna do?
I think she's still feeling guilty, because I don't think Harry ever gave her like really any closure. It's all been on her own, because that's how the men would operate, right? And so he's just like, why the fuck are you bringing this up? I got over this. And didn't consider how she's feeling about the situation. But she's trying to get over it.
I like the part where Bud has to explain to Pete that you can't take a donation back. Like, that was just, I don't know why, but like that line gets it gets me every time. There's a nice little reference here too. Unless you had something, Will.
No, I mean, not for that. I was gonna point out that Pete has a real maniacal laugh when he thinks about the movie Rope and about potentially murdering his mom.
It was pretty messed up.
Yeah. We didn't really talk much about Alison Brie being back in this episode. It was nice to see Trudy again.
I guess we haven't seen her in a little bit.
Yeah,
I think we last saw her like when they were doing the episode where was it 3 Sundays? The one where Pete gets the test, or they go to see the doctor.
No. Last time we saw Trudy was when Pete got his rocks off thinking about Pearl Harbor.
That's the one episode I'm talking about. Actually, no, I think we saw her even sooner.
Yeah.
I think we saw her in the Memorial Day episode, Maiden Form, because we see Pete and her and Bud and Judy doing like a Memorial Day barbecue.
Exactly. I do just want to clarify, yes, that Will, you are thinking the same episode, because Pete gets his rocks off to Pearl Harbor to prove he isn't the problem and that Trudy is.
There you go. I think it's funny that Dawn lies about taking Bobby to Yankees games all the time. Like, I can't even imagine Dawn and Bobby like at a baseball game.
I love how reflexively he lies about it. He doesn't even like for 1 second like, yes, he's just like, yep.
Yeah, whatever you want.
And it's such a good time to go to Yankees games too. Like,
yeah,
I don't know how many listeners are baseball fans, but yeah, this is like a great time. I mean, typically it's a good time to be a Yankees fan, but this is especially a good time.
Mike would know. Mike is a baseball super fan in ways that Will and I can't understand and be part of. But
wait, what are you talking about? I like baseball.
You like baseball? Well,
yeah,
you've never mentioned it in our entire friendship. You've never made like a baseball reference. You've never used it as a metaphor. You never just like false. Look at that fastball, like right there.
You are gaslighting.
You never mentioned
listeners.
The teams. No, we've watched baseball movies, and you're just kind of like, yeah, there's baseball in it. Who cares?
It's not. That's false. It's football you're thinking of.
Baseball too.
Yeah, no, I'm a fan of baseball, and you are lying to me. You are lying to yourself, and you're lying to these poor listeners.
I genuinely feel like we have never had a single conversation about baseball where I've got any indication from you whatsoever. But okay, I believe you, obviously, but I'm still a little bit taken aback.
Oh man,
Will's
talking
just
about
being
baseball
dumb right now.
with you right now.
Oh, I take all my friends to the Pirates games.
Right.
Oh yeah, I love going.
I went to the Pirates.
Like everybody I care about knows how much I love baseball. I tell them all the time. Oh, just people that I'm fond of and invest in emotionally. Yeah.
I saw the Pirates earlier this summer. I had a great time.
Will still thinks that Andrew McCutcheon is still on the Pirates. That's a joke for all my baseball fans. He just got
back on the Pirates.
Here we go. I just can't.
He just rejoined the team.
Maybe you did mention baseball, me did, Will, but like my eyes glazed over. That's probably what it is. I also really like how there's another sort of reference to, it's a fun little like in-universe world building thing that Betty is like really good at cards. Like she's really good at card games. She's really good at things like poker. And every time we see her with that, she wins. Like when they played Pinochle, like she wins. And her dad kind of like adds a little bit of flair to that lore when he mentions that like she has a real good mind for it. And it kind of had me thinking, it's like, that makes sense for Betty as a character. Like, she's really good at bluffing. She's really good at like pretending to like have different, she's good at pretending, I guess. And she's also like in her like sort of dollhouse persona, she understands people. She understands what people will do, and she's good at anticipating things and how little things work. She's kind of like a low-key genius, but like obviously she's not in an environment that brings it out of her.
She's an expert on getting down to poker.
Yeah, I mean, it doesn't take much in this episode, that's for sure. All right, I was going to mention, I do like, this is one of those times where Pete kind of comes out on top when it comes to like his family. He has like a bit of a triumphant moment, you know, it's just sort of like washing his hands of his mother's bullshit when she's just like, you know, talking about adoption, like they're pulling from the discards, like that kind of thing. And it's one of those times where you can kind of like Pete a little bit. He obviously undoes it completely when he talks to Peggy later, but yeah.
That's a bit of a foul ball, as they say in baseball, John.
See, this is what I'm talking about. You've never done that. You've never been like, that's a home run, John. Like, never.
Will, do you want to start a baseball podcast without John? We'll call it,
sure.
It ain't over till it's baseball.
Yeah. Yeah, it ain't baseball till it's baseball.
It's just the pitch. It's a Mad Men baseball podcast.
Yeah.
I really, really like that really awkward scene where Don and Betty are undressing, and it's like they're in the room, and it's like you can kind of just feel like they're shedding the facade of like pretending that their marriage is fine, and then it's just like nothing but themselves in their underwear, and they kind of it's like an Adam and Eve kind of like base thing. And yeah, I just think it's really I read too that this is part of the trivia, but they choreographed that undressing scene like in a very specific way, and I'm glad they did, because it just, the tension of it is just so good and so palpable. But yeah,
because there's like one moment where like his head's like is on the ground that you see like the like dress kind of fall, like, and yeah, it's just like cool stuff.
I was also going to note that Viola's advice to Betty, where she's like, everything is good outside that door. I've noticed for the first time, it's really similar to Carla's advice to Betty in the last episode, where she's just like, you know, wash your face, go outside. And when you come back, you'll see things are right where you left it. Like, it's very similar. Like, things are good outside, like go, you know, and that connects to ultimately the advice that Don takes, because Don does that. He leaves, he goes outside, he's going to LA because that might be something that helps him out. And hey, maybe that's going to connect to what Carla said. It's like, you know, when Don comes back, things will theoretically be, you know, right where he left him, right?
Yeah, well, I'm sure Don going to LA is going to be business as usual. Nothing crazy is going to happen. He's going to come back. It's going to be the same as ever.
Yeah, nothing's going to happen in the next episode. I also like when Betty tells Don, and she's like, I think you should leave. And he's just sort of like, he's so taken aback by it.
Yeah.
Yeah? Yeah, I know.
No, keep going. Yeah, go, keep going. I want you to finish your thought.
just going to, he has a chance, right, of like why he should stay. And she even tells him, she's just like, that's why, you know, like, it's just because he thinks he should be there for her. And when she says, like, we were just pretending, he has a chance. And I think you see it on his face. It's like he knows in this moment a way that he could possibly fix this entire thing is if he says to her right then and there, I was not pretending. But I think he's so, like, it's so obvious that he was pretending. It's so obvious that he was putting on a performance. Not even he can bring himself to lie. He just leaves. Because I think it's right there on his face is like, he knows that she knows. He knows that if he tries to lie, she's not going to buy it. And I think that there's like a corner being turned here where he's actually starting to respect Betty for the first time and understand that, like, I cannot just bullshit this woman anymore. I actually kind of have to have a grappling with this situation. And I really like the subtlety of that scene for that reason.
Yeah, definitely heavier than the other skits. Hey, Mike, do you prefer season 2 or season 1 of I Think You Should Leave?
Oh, it's season 2 without doubt.
Interesting.
You know, it's just, I'm just the tiredest I've ever been.
Okay.
Patty Harrison from I Think You Should Leave. She's wonderful in theater
I got
camp,
sewn into the pants of Charlie Brown.
I don't know if you guys know, Patty Harrison is an alumni of my college.
Who isn't?
Sure.
That's the fucking party you were at watching Mad Men?
I don't think so.
Patty Harrison was there, yeah.
I don't believe so.
I
don't know if we ever crossed paths in school.
I do want to say,
I don't even know if you guys are similar age. Isn't she older?
Yeah, she's a few years older than me, I think.
She also has millions of dollars because she got sewn into the pants of Charlie Brown in the Macy's Day Parade. But
I already said why I think Don went to LA, but did you guys have any of your own takes on why you think he's decided to go?
I mean, he's been prone to leave in moments of danger. Obviously, we saw that in season 1 when like the cards were kind of up against him, and he didn't really know what to do. His first thought was to flee. I feel like he's never really had his like feet so, too deep into the ground. So I feel like he has kind of a fight or flight mentality where it's just like, if things aren't really working out, I'm just going to go somewhere else and hope they work out there, or maybe find some clarity. And I feel like that's kind of apparent in this episode.
I think it's similar to why Betty fucked him. Don plays the role at Betty's parents' house all weekend, and that's all Don does, right? He plays a role and expects it to be enough, and then he gets home, and Betty tells him to leave. And to your point, John, I think really for me, Don's reaction is, "What the fuck? I was playing the role. How can you expect me? I'm doing it. Like, this is what you want. I was playing the doting husband. I dealt with your dad all weekend." Right? And so similar to Betty being like, nothing is going the way it should, I need control. I think Don goes to LA to be like, I'm not letting these young guys pass me up and go to LA. Like, this is work. This is important. I need to go. And that's, I think, the impetus to leaving.
And yeah, I mean, it's a clear kind of power play, but there is also a kind of sense of immaturity, I imagine, there, where he's just kind of just like, well, I want this instead. Like, where he isn't really, he's obviously in a not great place with Roger at the moment, given what happened an episode or two before. And I feel like he just kind of like sees the opportunity to kind of assert his power, similar, like you said, with Betty, where she kind of wanted to claim a moment of, a power. He's kind of just like, well, I can do this because I can, and I'm going to do it. Yeah. So suck it, Paul.
There you go. Yeah, I think that's all pretty valid. Yeah, I think we're all saying different things, but things that are kind of related to each other and equally like valid for sure. All right, I have some trivia, and then we can say goodbye until the next episode of Jet Set. So this is a fun one. When this episode came out, it was 1 month before the 2008 U.S. presidential election, and there was a little bit of controversy around the Gene character because he sort of looks like John McCain. And in this episode, like, it kind of seems like, I think people interpreted it as like they were taking shots at John McCain in this, of like the, not necessarily the dementia thing, but just that, like, implying that he had lost his step or like trying to make fun of him and stuff, which doesn't make sense really, because like, the actor was cast for season 1. He was in the show last season, but of course people were going to, complain and do all that. There was something else here. Weiner actually had a dream about a suitcase, which is referenced in this episode when Betty says that she had a dream about a suitcase. And keep that in mind, because there's something really important about that. It is, of course, interesting. Like, we had the episode, I think it was the last episode with, 6 month leave, or where the Samsonite pitch was about a suitcase. And then we, of course, said goodbye to Freddie. So, yeah, the idea of suitcases is one to keep in mind. Also, you already kind of mentioned when William comes through the entrance of the window at the Hofstede household. That's actually, according to Weiner, a reference to Rebecca, the movie Rebecca, where George Sanders comes in through the window, and that's his entrance.
Yeah. Big Hitchcockian episode.
Yeah, and I just watched, we watched Rebecca a couple of years ago for an extra milestone, I want to say. But then last year, Matthew Weiner has said outright, because there were some people who were questioning or wondering like if Betty was molested as a kid, and that's why Gene was, feeling her up or getting confused. But he said no, like specifically this is a product of dementia. So, and oh no, I did have one more. It's not confirmed, but in the DVD commentaries, the actor said they believe that scene where Paul is in like the car with the other protester, the voter registration folks, and he says like the consumer has no color. They believe that car was literally just like driving around the lot where they shoot the show, and that's why you'll notice that the windows all have curtains. So it is such a weird scene too, because like the windows have curtains, and it's odd because it's like, it looks like they're in some kind of like army bus or something like that. At least I think so. But no, that's not the case. And that is everything I got. I hope you guys had fun talking about Mad Men again, like we did last summer.
Yeah, I mean, I can't say this episode was a home run.
Oh man, is this going to be like the new recurring thing? Will you're going to start showing me up, trying to prove to the listeners like, no, I was doing this all along.
Yeah, man. I don't know. I just feel like you are choosing your own reality. And I don't know why you think I haven't been a fan of baseball, but I'll prove you wrong.
I just feel like this is coming from left field. I don't know.
There you go. No, that's nice. Yeah, we should end it there.